Hey Chads, how you doing? I hope you all doing great. So in this video, as you see in the thumbnail, we are gonna see, what if Naruto fall in love with One Piece girls? So love part is quite plot twisted, so watch all part of this series, till end, and this is part 1, and if you want more, then please leave a like, share and subscribe. Let's get in the video. The Fishman District started out as a gigantic institution to take care of orphan children. But barely a year after its creation it descended into chaos and anarchy. The people in charge were unable to keep their charges under control and so became a lawless region, homes to rebels and outcasts of Fishman Island. Gang violence was an everyday occurrence and normally most fishmen within the district didn't live long lives. That was until one of the mightiest fishmen to ever exist took over the entire district and ruled over it until he left to be an adventurer. That man was none other than Fisher Tiger, the first captain of the Sun Pirates, the only person of any species to stand up to the Mariagewa, and possibly one of the 4 most famous fishmen to ever come out of the district. The second being Jinbe, Royal Knight of King Neptune's army, the second captain of the Sun Pirates, and first fishman to join the 7 warlords of the sea. The third being the infamous Arlong, a crew member of the Sun Pirates, and later the captain of the Arlong Pirates. And finally the fourth being Macro, a member of the Sun Pirates, the later captain of the Macro Pirates, and a notorious slave trader. But on this day a 5th person would be joining them, a fishman by the name of Uzumaki Naruto. His story started like any other, he was born to Namikaze Minato, a bull shark fishman, and Uzumaki Kushina, a dolphin mermaid. He grew up with love and affection until the two were captured while they were out catching fish for their small but respectable restaurant and eventually sold in Sabati Archipelago, leaving him at the mercy of the Fishman District. This is his story. Hearing the telltale scream of a fishman getting the living crap beaten out of him was the alarm clock Naruto woke up to. Flinging the torn and dirty blanket, the blonde yawned before getting to his feet. Bringing his hand to his back, he bent it back and popped his spine back into alignment after sleeping on the hard floor within the hut he was provided with. After scratching his side, Naruto proceeded to put on a blue shirt and a slightly tattered pair of white shorts. I wonder if Madam Shirley has some work for me? He wondered to himself. After his parents were abducted, the blonde fishman was forced to live within the Fishman District when he was 6 years old, and it was only 6 months ago did he find a job that wasn't illegal after nearly 2 years. Giving a fond smile, he remembered going past the Mermaid Cove for one errand he was hired for within the Fishman District. All was what he considered normal while he was returning after the successful drop-off when he found himself abducted by the playful mermaids, and because he was described as adorably cute, they helped him as best as they could once they found out about his life. Whenever he came around they always had some sort of work for him, usually they were small stuff, but he was eternally grateful for their kindness. After walking out of the severely damaged hut, Naruto headed straight towards the Coral Mansion on the seafloor of Fishman Island. Stepping over several unconscious bodies, he kept his eyes peeled for any type of threat hidden within the dark alleyways. It wouldn't be the first time a child, or even an adult, jumped him. After Fisher Tiger's death, the peace that used to govern the Fishman District once again erupted into anarchy. Times were hard back then, but after the great pirate fell things just became worse for everyone. Thankfully for him nothing happened on his way out. Sure, he passed several dangerous-looking fishmen, each boasting how they were better than the human race. Hearing that caused Naruto to grit his sharp teeth in anger. Humans, what a foul word. Before his parents were taken from him, he honestly didn't think much about the surface dwellers. Yes, he listened to Queen Otohime's speeches to her people about forming a bond with humans. She would also ask them to sign a petition to promote coexistence. Most, however, were met with refusals. Even now he kind of felt sorry for his queen. She tried so hard and got nothing but disappointment in return, and it did wrench his heart when she apparently got drunk and screamed at everyone over the loudspeakers. But for him it was far too late to feel anything for humans, especially when they would destroy anyone's life to make a quick buck. The blonde soon stopped his self-loathing when he accidentally bumped into someone big. Looking up, Naruto's jaw dropped when he saw probably one of the biggest fishmen he ever saw in his entire life. Standing at what he believed was 9'8", the person was obviously a blue-skinned whale shark fishman with a face that he could only compare it to a demon's. He had yellow eyebrows and sideburns, a bold black nose and an angular lower lip pointing upwards. A lightning-shaped scar can be seen from his left sideburn and reaching over his left eye. He had a severe underbite that possessed 2 tusk-like conical lower fangs. His long two-tone black hair had 2 long white stripes coming from the roots over his forehead and trailing down the back, and a small tuft of hair on his chin with a slight green hue. His hands and feet were webbed, typical for a normal fishman, and his limbs were somewhat thin in comparison with his enormous girth. And finally his gills were in between his shoulders and neck. He was wearing a fancy-looking diamond-shaped karakusa with a floral design with a purple scarf like a ribbon around his waist. For the fishman's footwear, he appeared to be wearing simple sandals on his webbed feet. Leaning forward, the large fishman bent his knees until he could fully see the person he bumped into. "Are you okay, little one?" his rough but kind voice asked. "Yeah, I am," Naruto stammered out. When the man offered his giant hand, the blonde happily took it before he was easily raised to his feet. "I'm sorry I bumped into you, Mr. Jin." The gigantic fishman introduced himself. The Knight of the Sea. The blonde's blue eyes nearly bulged out of his eyes in awe that he was looking upon one of the most legendary fishmen around. Giving Naruto a chuckle in response, Jin patted the young boy on the head. "Now where are you going all off in a rush?" Becoming slightly flustered at the attention he was receiving, he sputtered a bit before answering. I was heating." Before he could complete his answer, the two heard a loud crash, alerting everyone within the area. Jin looked over to see a giant ship that was completely wrecked at the entrance of Fishman Island. "What's going on, Mr. Jin?" Naruto asked the whale shark fishman. "I honestly don't know, let's go find out." Grabbing the boy by the back of his shirt, the former pirate captain firmly placed him on his shoulders and ran towards the side of the wreck. Before the former pirate captain could get there was already a crowd, an angry crowd. Many of the merpeople's eyes widened when they saw the torn sails that had the insignia of the world government, and it got worse when he saw a man with his dark green hair stick up at the top of his head. The wide, obese face with a bulbous nose, thick lips, and small slit-like eyes. The man was also wearing a white protective suit and was extremely bloody and injured. This man was Saint Mjosgard, a world noble. Mjosgard pulled a flintlock from the holster on his belt and shot it off into the air and began screaming. "Blast it all. Those worthless fools," dying after another. Pointing his pistol at a random fishman and continued his haughty screaming. "You there? Fish. Bring me my mask at once. The stench of this place is simply unbearable. Hurry up and bring me my mask. Save my life, you insignificant creature," I demanded. The entire crowd just stayed still, many glaring at the world noble. Panting loudly, the world noble shakily pointed his pistol at a mermaid. "Are you all deaf?" I said. "Bring me a doctor, I require treatment." Instead of a doctor walking forward, several large fishmen stepped forward, each carrying a firearm and each having a tattoo of a red sun on various parts of their bodies. Saint Mjosgard's eyes widened in recognition and opened his fat mouth once again. It's you, my slaves. You must return with me immediately. Who gave you permission to leave, you lousy fish?" In response to the man's useless screaming, the scariest looking fishman stepped on the noble's flintlock and kept it under his foot, much to the man's shock. The various merpeople gasped, each shouting for them to stop what they were doing, and Mjosgard once again screaming at them, making threats and how important he was. The scariest looking of them sneered at him. "In the world above, you are protected by the treat of marine admirals coming to save your sorry ass." His sneer quickly twisted into an evil grin before he continued. "But we're in the depths. As long as everyone is quiet, this will be no more than an accident at sea." The fishman's words seemed to have a strong effect because every resident began to shout their encouragement. "Shoot him," they screamed. "Kill him," he screamed. "Make him suffer like he did to us," they screamed. "Don't you dare," Saint Mjosgard screamed. "I'm an important person. You can't do this to me. You of all people, I could never forgive. Even if I tried." The fishman screamed at the world noble before pulling the trigger. The cheering immediately died down, and the cheering soon turned to gasps of horror. On top of the world noble was a golden blonde-haired mermaid that was partially held up in two short loops. She also had green eyes, thick eyelashes, and wore pink lipstick. The mermaid was wearing a very long white kimono with a cream-colored carp scale design and a white cloth around her shoulders that somehow floated behind her head. The fishman who pulled the trigger immediately began to tear up out of shock. Queen Otohime. Ignoring the searing pain in her right arm from where she was shot, Otohime turned her head towards everyone. "Drop your weapons now," she commanded. "There are children watching." "Aladdin. I heard a world noble was here, where is he?" Jin shouted once he arrived. Turning to face him was a tall, muscular merman with slanted thin eyes, dark hair tied in a long ponytail falling on his back in many curves that matched his full beard with a goatee. He had long light-colored tail on the upper part but darker near the fin area. The man wore a long, open black vest with the Sun Pirate's Jolly Roger on the left side of his stomach, along with a tattoo on his left bicep that said 1TC. Clutched in his hands was a silver trident. "I don't know, I just got here myself," he then trailed off and raised an eyebrow when he saw a boy on his former boss's shoulders. But coming right behind him were the queen's children. One being a cream-skinned muscular shark merman with a wide chest and large arms. He had a long face, framed by blue wavy fair hair flowing down to his shoulders, a sharp and pointy nose, and some sort of dot on his forehead. He had gills on his massive neck and a dark blue tail with light blue polka dots. The only piece of clothing he wore was a purple garment around his waist, held up by an extremely long light blue long band, which posseed over his shoulders, drawing a circle around the back of his neck. and falls down to his waist, seemingly floating behind him. The second was a light brown-skinned oarfish merman and was easily the tallest of the three males and extremely thin as well. He had wide eyes, long wavy orange hair, gills running along his neck, and beaver-like teeth. He also has a long purple tail with white polka dots and a red fin. Unlike the other two, he was the only one fully clothed in the upper body, wearing a fancy white robe-like garment with sleeves that are puffed at the shoulders and wrists and an orange sash around his waist in the same manner as his eldest brother. The third was a pink-skinned rotund, stocky and large Appa merman. Like the other three, he had a polka dot tail, with a black variation, along with white polka dots and red scales. He wore a blue hat with a white stripe going across the middle of it that barely covered his brown hair and the red fins on his head. And like his eldest brother, he wore a light blue garment around his waist, held in place by a yellow sash in the exact same manner as the other two. Finally, the last was a mermaid, a giant-sized smelt whiting mermaid with short strawberry blonde hair with a fish-shaped hair grip, green eyes like her mother's, and a permanent blush on her cheeks. She had a very long light red and pink striped tail, with broadly striped tail ends and a ruffle around her waist. The only piece of clothing she wore was a cream-colored crop top with floating straps. Naruto really didn't pay attention to what they were saying, instead he kept his eyes on the queen. He saw her begging them not to harm the noble, for the sake of the children. He saw her telling them not to pass their hatred on to the next generation. But her speech fell deaf on the world nobles. With an insane glee in his eyes, Saint Mjosgard picked up his discarded pistol and pointed it at his queen's head. Jin saw the action and opened his mouth to shout out a warning. But suddenly his shoulders felt heavy, like 10 pounds were suddenly dropped on him, then he felt light as a feather and saw Naruto springing at the world noble, with a roar of furious outrage escaping from his mouth. The roar was soon silenced as the blonde's mouth firmly clamped onto Mjosgard's gun arm, his teeth digging into the soft flesh of his hand and his gun, snapping the deadly weapon in half. As the noble fell back in a loud scream of pain, Otohime immediately turned around to see a boy that barely looked to be about 8 years old. At first she thought he was a human with his lack of webbed hands and feet, tanned skin, and messy blonde hair. But taking a closer look, she saw the telltale gills on his neck, the dorsal fin on his back, the black tiger stripes running along his arms, a few on his fin, and oddly enough 3 thin ones on each side of his cheeks, but most importantly his sharp teeth tearing into Saint Mjosgard's hand. She went to raise her arm to stop him, but then she saw the boy's eyes, his eyes that were the color of the sea, were filled with so much hate and rage. The sight of a child having eyes like that brought tears to her eyes. "You little freak." Saint Mjosgard screamed at Naruto. Violently flinging his bloody hand towards his ship, the sudden movement forced the tiger shark fishman to tear great chunks of flesh, muscle, and most importantly his thumb and index from his hand. While he cried in absolute pain, the boy hit the ship hard enough to normally kill a child. While he was sniveling about the loss of his precious fingers and his royal blood being spilt by a lowly fish, he did take pleasure in his superior mind that the boy was now dead for his sins. Or that's what he thought until he heard an angry groan coming from his ship. Fearfully turning his head, he saw Naruto getting to his feet. Everyone saw him spitting the man's fingers and flesh from his mouth. And the promise of violence in his eyes as his body looked like it expanding with muscle and adrenaline. Jin's eyes widened when the boy raised his right arm and punched the hull of the ship, causing the hull to quake and shatter upon impact. Screaming out in terror, Saint Mjosgard brought his left hand down to his hip holster and brought out his second and last pistol. Shakily raising it at the enraged fishman, tears of terror spilled from his eyes and snot dripped down his nose. "What the hell are you?" he screamed when a sudden terrible smell came from his pants and a vision of a defiant bull shark fishman he killed a year and a half ago replaced the boy attacking him. Then for the first time in his entire life the noble put 2 and 2 together and gave off a wicked chuckle. "Now I see it, you're the spawn of that fish and mermaid. Ha ha ha. Well then, die with your wretched family." Naruto's eyes widened from the noble's confession. He clutched his head within his hands. His mind processed what Mjosgard said before he screamed a heart-wrenching scream of sorrow and denial. His eyes that were once blue slowly became as crimson as freshly spilt blood, baring his bloody teeth hatefully at the world noble. He bolted towards him, tearing up the ground with each step as his rage poured out of him. While this was happening, a 6-year-old Shirahashi, not used to the violent nature she was witnessing, began to cry. Raising her head upwards, she screamed at it all to stop at the top of her lungs. Her screams echoed throughout the entire ocean, causing the ground underneath them to shake and crumble, before bursting to reveal 3 gigantic sea kings, the biggest of them devouring the noble's ship. Many people shrieked in terror. Saint Mjosgard fainted with a good amount of foam falling from his mouth. All except Naruto, he just stared impassively at the 3 creatures before letting out a threatening roar. To the second shock of those still conscious, the 3 sea kings let out a submissive whimper and slightly lowered their gigantic heads. With a growl escaping his throat, the blonde started walking towards the unconscious world noble. Every merfolk gathered there took a step back when they saw the determination to kill the noble in his crimson eyes. Otohime, however, couldn't allow him, a child, to stain his hands with another's blood and float over in front of the noble, blocking him with her arms wide open. Naruto didn't even stop when he saw his queen in front of him. He was too far deep in his anger that he flexed his right hand, his small muscles bulging. He geared up to attack the two of them. Everyone panicked when his fist lashed out at the queen's face. The women shrieked out in terror. The men moved to stop him, but it was useless when the tiger shark fishman stopped just inches from her face. Tears spilled from his eyes when they returned to their true blue color. Just looking at Otohime's determined face stopped him from going through with his murderous deed, and seeing her daughter, who looked no older than 6, crying for everything to stop, he couldn't do that to another child. Especially when it happened to him. Feeling two gentle arms wrap around his shoulders, Naruto collapsed from exhaustion into the warm embrace of his queen, fully spent from the amount of energy he used today. The mermaid princess and the sea king at the same exact moment. Jin whispered to himself in disbelief, turning his giant head towards the queen. He saw her ask his former crewmate to take care of the human. "It will be done, my queen," Aladdin reluctantly said, "but what of the boy?" "I will take care of him myself," Otohime told him as she gently picked the boy into her arms. Several hours passed after the incident at the front gate, yet King Neptune was not satisfied just hearing about it from one person. As king, he needed to hear all the accounts. So far he listened to Aladdin, then Hody Jones. His wife was currently with their daughter to keep her calm. So far he didn't like being what he was told. But now he was asking his most trusted friend, Jin. The king was a giant-sized and muscular coelegant merman. He had a dark red nose, small eyes, and long thick orange curly hair, eyebrows, and beard. The merman was bare-chested, revealing a thick amount of hair on his chest and arms, and he had matching black tattoos on both arms, which looked like spirals with wavy protrusion designs around it. The only things that would be considered clothing was a golden crown that resembled a tulip with jewels embedded on the base of it, a golden bracelet on each of his wrists, and a golden trident with an elaborate design laying near him. At his side was Ho, a gigantic whale that was his pet, as well as his transportation. The mammal was black in color with a light underbelly, a set of rounded teeth and round eyes. He was wearing an elaborate crown on his head and a bubble ring to swim through the air since he wasn't in the water at the moment. "Jin," Neptune's sophisticated voice said to the former captain of the Sun Pirates. "I want to know what happened at the entrance and why a world noble is missing his fingers and a young fishman in one of the guest rooms." Bowing in response, the whale shark fishman began telling his king from his own point of view. "My lord, it all started out when I bumped into the young boy on my way here. He came from the Fishman district." Seeing his king narrow his eyebrows at the mere mention of that crime-ridden place, Jin sighed a bit. "I know, your majesty, I don't like that place either, but he is just a child who lost his parents." "I know that," Neptune said, "it just breaks my heart seeing that my intention for good backfired." After a moment of self-brooding, the king motioned for Jin to continue. "After I introduced myself, we both heard a loud crash, and I took him with me to investigate. I thought it would be a good idea at the time, my king." He defended himself a tiny bit when he saw Neptune raise an eyebrow at him. "When we got there, I saw Queen Otohime defending the world noble from being killed by the angry members of my former crew after a bullet grazed her. She then gave a speech about not passing the hatred onto the children." Giving the king a fanged smile, Jin said, "It struck a chord in me, at least until the world noble tried to shoot her. Before I could attempt to stop him, the boy flew from my shoulders and attacked him. I saw the boy bite clean through the gun and into the noble's hand." The man screamed out in pain before flinging his off his hand, taking his fingers and a good part of his hand with him. "When the boy hit the hull of the ship, I thought he snapped his neck." "But he didn't, did he?" Neptune asked. "No, instead the boy got back up and I saw his eyes. Your majesty, the boy's eyes that were blue when I met him were pure blood red. Not just his sclera, iris, or even his pupil. They were all completely blood red. That's not all what normally should have been a weak 10-year-old, at least until he hit puberty. He destroyed the hull of the ship, tore up the ground underneath him, and him normal arms bulged with muscle that he shouldn't have." Neptune's black eyes widened in realization. "Jin, surely you don't mean the boy has the—" "I do, my lord. The boy has what I like to call Sea King mode, an incredible power that grants him the strength, anger and ferocity of a Sea King. From what I saw, he had the crimson red eyes, the muscle expansion, the high immunity to pain with what I suspect was a high amount of adrenaline, the intense bloodlust, and most importantly the submissive nature from the 3 Sea Kings your daughter summoned." King Neptune leaned back and rubbed his bearded chin with his left hand. Within the entire history of the Ryugu kingdom there existed 3 legends. The first being the Tamadabako, a mystical box that was capable of making anyone older and rumored to be held with the royal family, something he would neither confirm nor deny. The second being the mermaid princess of a mermaid capable of speaking with sea kings every few hundred years, which was apparently his only daughter Shirahashi. And the third and final legend was the Sea King, just like the mermaid princess, only every few hundred years a fishman was granted with the power of the Sea Kings. What do you suppose we do, old friend? Neptune asked. If we leave this matter alone there will be a catastrophe on our hands. Otohime and I can handle things with Shirahashi, but what shall we do with the boy? I will handle things with the boy, my king. Jin told him. But don't you have your duties as one of the 7 warlords? I have not been given any duties from the world government. I will train the boy for as long as I can, and if I have to I will take him with me to see the world and introduce him to the various cultures of the world. And of course lessen his hatred on humanity. The former sun pirate responded. Then let it be done. Neptune said to him. While the king and warlord were chatting in the throne room, Otohime found herself standing in front of the room Naruto was sleeping in. After assuring Shirahashi that everything was fine, the queen found herself in thinking about the nameless blonde tiger shark that nearly killed the world noble. When she saw his eyes that were as blue as the sea, she saw that he experienced the tragedy of losing his parents, something that nearly broke him and brought the hatred of humanity in his heart. Opening the door, Otohime entered the low-lit room to see the boy peacefully sleeping in a medium-sized bed. Almost floating towards him, the queen slowly brought her right hand towards his tanned face, gently placing her index finger on one of his whiskered cheeks, then to her surprise the boy leaned into her hand. Mom. She heard him whisper out. Giving a sad smile, the queen stayed like that for the longest time, just keeping the fishman company like a mother would do for a child. The serene moment was soon interrupted by a soft knocking on the door. Come in. She gently called out. The door opened to reveal Jin. The gigantic fishman knelt down to poke his head through the 6-foot-tall door. My queen, may I have a word with you? Reluctantly pulling his hand away from the boy's head, she bent over to give him a motherly kiss on his forehead to keep him at ease before leaving the room. After quietly closing the door, Otohime tuned to Jin. What did my husband say? After hearing all sides of the incident from Aladdin, Hody, and myself, we both came to the conclusion that the boy should stay here in the palace. As soon as he awakes I will start training. Jin's sentence was immediately cut off when Otohime jumped to his height and bopped him on the head. Blinking in surprise, the former pirate captain looked down at the goldfish mermaid. You will not be training him. The queen said to him. You saw what happened to him today. What that boy needs is love and a family right now, not learning how to fight. But my queen. The whale shark fishman protested. Poking the former pirate captain in the stomach, Otohime continued to protest his decision, poking his stomach with each and every word. I know what he is, Jin. Like Shirahashi, he's one of the legends that have been passed down for generations. He needs to learn that not all humans are like the noble he met today. Please just trust me on this. Rubbing his stomach, Jin could only and reluctantly nod at his queen's logic. But you may want to take that with your husband. Just leave him to me. The queen smiled at him. Almost an hour later, Naruto woke from his sleep. Grumbling about the stupid floor, he placed his hands on the soft floor. Wait a second, the floor wasn't soft. His eyes widening, he threw the royal blue sheets off and fell to the floor. His bare feet feeling the carpet, he bolted towards the door, frantically slamming the door open. The blonde's breath hitched when he saw the marble walls and the fancy decorations. No. He whispered to himself, I've been captured. Hearing the sound of footsteps and chattering voices, Naruto ran in the opposite direction. The sound of his bare feet clapping against the tiles, his head frantically searching for any exits that he could find. He didn't care if it was an air duct, a door, or even a window to jump out of. Anything was better than the unspeakable things the king would do for killing the queen. Skidding to a stop when he heard voices around the corners, the tiger shark fishman frantically searched for a way out. There were no doors near him, soldiers were coming from each side of the hallways. The only thing in front of his was a balcony. With the need to survive overpowering his sense of judgment, he sped towards the balcony and jumped off it. Immediately he knew that was not a good idea when he saw nothing but a garden. Oh, shy. Meanwhile, below the balcony, Shirahashi was happily clapping to her brothers, Ryabashi and Mambashi, doing a wild and silly dance in front of her, while Fukabashi stood on the side with a humorous smile on his face. While his younger brothers were entertaining the only sister he had in the world, his mind was in another place. More specifically, it was on the events from a few hours ago, when he saw that tiger shark fishman, well, the term would be fishboy as he should rightfully call him. And his pure savagery against the world noble. Thankfully his younger siblings were more or less ignorant or too shocked to hear what transpired between that horrible man and the young boy. Shaking his head, he honestly couldn't believe that a boy barely a year older than his sister went through so much in the years where one was normally showered with love and affection. But the most important was his intense hatred of humans. The first prince himself didn't know too much about humanity, except what his mother taught him and all the children who came for her lessons. But her lessons included their society, their achievements, and most importantly their acts of kindness towards each other. The noble, however, dashed many of those lessons out the window, showing him that his mother was sugarcoating the truth. Any more thoughts on the matter were interrupted when he heard a long running of teas. Looking upwards, his siblings and himself saw the blonde falling out of the sky. He hit a surface that broke his fall. It wasn't the ground or the flowers, no, it was his little sister's head. The fishman bounced right off her forehead and then violently hit the ground with a loud thump. The two younger brothers screamed in surprise and immediately went to calm their teary-eyed sister. Fukabashi turned his head towards the tiger shark fishman he was just thinking of, suppressing a chuckle when he saw his spiraling eyes and exaggerated bump on his head. The merman wiggled on over to his unconscious form and started poking his forehead with his tail. A minute later Naruto irritably whacked whatever was prodding him in the forehead. "Ugh, can someone tell me the name of the ship that hit me?" he muttered to himself. "The ship as you called her was my little sister." An unfamiliar voice alerted the blonde. His eyes widening, Naruto slowly turned his head to see the semi-familiar face of Prince Fukabashi. Immediately panicking, he sprang to his feet and got into a sloppy fighting stance. "I'm sorry, didn't mean to please it, uncle." "I'm sorry, what did you say?" Fukabashi asked. Hearing the calmness in the merman's voice, the tiger shark fishman lowered his arms. Seeing that the prince held a look of confusion instead of anger, the thought that he killed the queen lessened quite a bit, but he still wasn't fully convinced and asked one of the dumbest things in his short life. "The queen, is she okay?" "Mother is fine, exhausted from today's events, but in perfect health," the first prince said. Sighing in relief, the feeling of immense guilt was lifted from the blonde's shoulders, only to be replaced by two more weights when he was tackled by the other mermen and got into a small scuffle with them. Fukabashi squinted his eyes to see what was exactly going inside the cloud of dust, at least until a pebble flew out from the cloud and smacked him in between the eyes. "That's it. You three knock it off." Immediately the dust cloud died down, revealing Naruto pushing his right big toe up Ryabashi's nose, while the oarfish merman was strangling said foot while his tail was wrapped around the fishman's waist. And Manbashi was currently chomping on the blonde's head, even though Naruto's left arm was putting him in a headlock, causing Shirahashi to giggle a bit. "Now I'm going to ask 3 questions," the shark merman said to him after the three disengaged from each other. "First, I want to know how you got in the garden. Second, where did you come from, and finally, who are you?" "First of all, my name is Uzumaki Naruto," Naruto said to him. "I came from the Fishman district and somehow ended up here. Finally I jumped out of a window to fly out of here." He finished with a tone filled with sarcasm. This however was lost on the 3 younger siblings who gasped in awe. Letting out a chuckle of amusement, Fukabashi reached out and patted Naruto on the shoulder. He honestly didn't know why his mother brought the young tiger shark fishman into their home, whether it was impulsive, something she was insanely famous for, or planned after what he saw that day. He would do his best to make sure that whatever his mother's plans for him came to fruition. "You can really fly? That's so cool." Shirahashi giggled in excitement, bouncing up and down on her tail. The mermaid started clapping. "Do it again, do it again." Nervously scratching the back of his head, Naruto replied, "I'm afraid I can't right now." "Whis." The gigantic mermaid clasped her hands together and gave him the adorable gigantic teary-eyed look. Seeing the fishman in a pickle, Ryabashi and Manbashi gained 2 mischievous looks on their faces. "Don't worry, sis," Manbashi started. "He just needs a little help to get started," Ryabashi finished. In a balcony overlooking the garden, King Neptune, Queen Otohime, and Jin looked over the 5 children with smiles on their faces. They seemed to be interacting pretty well. At least until the 2 youngest mermen grabbed Naruto under his arms and threw him into the air. That only caused them to laugh when Shirahashi giggled in amusement. "Am I right? Or am I right?" Otohime's sweet yet all-knowing voice echoed in the male's ears. Letting out a sigh of exasperation, Neptune nodded in defeat. "Okay, my dear, we see your point. Young Naruto will stay with us so he can learn to master the gift within him." "It's Naruto, my king." Jin reprimanded the god of the sea, even though it was a small quirk in his king's personality. "But right now let's leave him be and have a normal childhood like other children should have." Giving a laugh of agreement, Neptune continued to look down on the now playing children. None of them knowing that the future they envisioned would spiral completely out of control. "What did you do this time?" Otohime asked as she crossed her arms over her chest. She tried to keep a stern face, but was failing to hold in her laughs. Hanging in front of her were none other than Naruto, thanks to the 3 royal knights guarding him, 2 flanking the one in the middle, with his webbed hand on the scruff of Naruto's shirt. The guards' armor that normally consisted of large striped snail shells as helmets and shoulder pads weren't their normal color of white and black, instead they were neon pink and burnt orange respectively. The one holding a grinning Naruto stepped forward, revealing himself to be a gray-skinned great white shark fishman. He had a bulged belly, but muscular arms and legs betrayed that one trait for the fishman held an aura of power. He had glaring eyes, with long and distinctive eyelashes, a mouth full of sharp triangular teeth, and a stub nose. He was the only one without a helmet to reveal his long curly black hair, with a long tuft hanging on the left part of his face. Slamming the trident in his right hand on the ground, the fishman told the queen just exactly what he did. "Your Majesty, we found this one committing unspeakable vandalism to the royal knight's armor. After being caught we gave chase and," he indicted towards the blonde, narrowing his eyes as he did so. "It took us over 3 hours to catch him. I do not know how or why he did it, but this cannot stand my queen." "I agree." Otohime responded with a barely contained smile. "Please take Naruto-chan to his room, the king, and I will have a serious discussion with him." Giving a bow to her, the three knights split off into 3 separate directions. "So Mr. Knight, you're not entirely mad that I defaced your armor, are you?" Naruto asked after they left the queen's presence. "Of course I am." The knight barked out in anger. "Not only did you single-handedly deface some very expensive armor that may have to be scrapped, but you also put itching powder into our clothes and dulled our weapons. And I keep telling you my name is Hody Jones, you little runt. Remember it." Not even fazed by the fishman's yelling, Naruto crossed his arms in front of him. "Those things are only minor annoyances with no permanent damage, Hody Jones. Besides, you will thank me in the long run." He cleaned his ear with his pinky as he hung from the great white fishman's left hand by the scruff of his yakuta, who looked puzzled by the brat's response. "Thank you? Why would I thank a little brat like you for making my life a living hell for the last 2 weeks? Just think about it." Naruto's voice took a sudden chill that surprised Hody as he turned towards the fishman, his eyes and mouth in a malign grimace. "The royal guard is supposed to protect the royal family, yet not once, not twice, but 3 times I have pranked you guys. Did it ever cross your mind that if a child could somehow sneak past you of all people, who says a professional assassin couldn't do the same thing, but instead of defacing your armor he slits your throats and then assassinates the royal family?" Hody couldn't believe what this kid had said, yet has made a point. A very interesting point. His intense eyes widening, Hody gave a shark-like grin before bursting into laughter. "Jahahaha. That's quite the dark mind you have there, boy, disguising something simple as a prank to teach us a lesson. I grew up in the Fishman district, that place changes people." The blonde deadpanned. "No shit, kid, I grew up there." Hody grunted in reply once he got to Naruto's designated room. Opening the door, he dropped the tiger shark fishman into it. "Now that you got your message across, I will inform everyone to up their efforts in protecting the royal family." Slamming the door shut, Hody Jones didn't see the unofficial member of the royal family opening his mouth and walked away. "An interesting brat," he thought to himself. Then he split his face with an ominous grin. "No, the perfect brat. I've always dreamed of mauling a world noble like that. Maybe one day, he could be of use. Yes, I could obtain the power of the Sea King for myself. I only need." His eyes looked towards the young tiger shark who hummed, blissfully unaware. A little push in the right direction. After Hody literally dropped Naruto into his room, the blonde found himself sitting on the small bed. His human fingers gently caressing the fine silk fabric that seemed alien to him. Moving his blue eyes, he honestly couldn't believe that he was in a room that wasn't filled with dirt, garbage, and completely wrecked. His eyes settled onto the giant desk that was 5 feet away from his bed. On it were 2 things that he couldn't tear his eyes away from. The first being a giant-sized mirror with golden trimmings and pearls embedded within it. When he looked at his reflection, he saw nothing but a complete stranger. The dirty street clothes that he was used to wearing, his somewhat dirty skin, and his unruly blonde hair were gone. In their place was someone he just didn't recognize that was completely clean and wearing a white yakuta and an orange sash. Getting off his bed, Naruto walked over to the second object on his desk. It was a photograph with a simple wooden frame. Sitting down in the wicker chair pulled by his desk, picking it up in his hands, a small, sad smile etched onto his face. In the photo were 3 people, the first being a 6-foot-tall gray-skinned bull shark fishman with blonde hair with jaw-length bangs, framing both sides of his face, bright blue eyes, and a real toothy smile. He was wearing a blue shirt with the sleeves torn off, tattered white shorts that reached his shins, and an iron fishing spear clutched in his right hand. The second was a beautiful dolphin-tailed mermaid with a slender, but feminine build, fair skin, bright red hair that reached her flippers, with strands that framed both sides of her smiling face, the left of which was parted by a yellow clip and violet eyes. The only piece of clothing she was wearing was a red bikini top that held in her decently sized breasts. And finally, the third person was a younger Naruto, smiling brightly as he held both his parents' hands. "It sure doesn't feel like it's been 2 years." He said to himself. "It feels much longer than that, hasn't it? Mom. Dad. I honestly don't know what to think. I feel so out of place here. 2 weeks ago I was living on the streets and doing odd jobs for the various criminals within the Fishman district, but then after biting off your killer's fingers, I'm in the Ryuju Palace of all places for something that I felt was justified. Hearing no response from the picture, the blonde let out a sad chuckle. "I'll thank Jin for bringing this back to me from my hut, I promise you all that. I just hope you guys are resting in peace, and I hope to see you too when I eventually die." Unknown to him, Otohime was standing outside with her ear pressed against the door. She wiped away a slight tear spilling from her left green eye when she heard the sorrow in his voice. Taking a calm breath, the goldfish mermaid brought her dainty right hand up and knocked on his door. "Naruto, can I please come in?" Hearing a yes in confirmation, she opened the door and found the tiger shark fishman sitting on the wicker chair by his desk. "I know why you're here, Your Highness. And I'm sorry for doing it." Naruto apologized. "Naruto, I'm not mad," Otohime said to him. "But I must know what's making you act this way." Poking his head in emphasis, she continued. "I know that readjusting from the streets may be hard for you, but I want to understand." "My queen, it's not easy to explain," the tiger shark fishman said to her. Opening his mouth to continue, Naruto found himself interrupted when he found himself pulled into Otohime's comforting hug. They separated, the young blonde tiger shark's shocked eyes staring into the kind understanding ones of the goldfish mermaid. "I have all the time in the world." While Otohime was dealing with Naruto, Jin was unfortunately dealing with Saint Njosgard once again. Dear Neptune, the man was testing his patience. Every single day since the man woke up, all he did was complain. He complained about the food, the medical treatment, the uncomfortable bed, the doctors and nurses, and most importantly the loss of his right thumb and index finger, and of course his demand that the monster who did this to him to be put to death. "Are you even listening?" Njosgard screamed at the whale shark fishman. "I want that water breather's head right in front of me now. And I keep telling you I will not heed to your regards, Saint Njosgard. That boy defended the queen that you threatened to kill. It may have been overkill, but at least you are still breathing. You should be grateful." Jin calmly responded to the extremely spoiled noble. "That is not good enough." The world noble literally spat at him. "I am a descendant of the 20 kings, the creators of the world government. The creators of order and peace in a world of injustice and discord. By birthright I am superior to you in each and every way. And if you don't comply, you abomination, I will have you killed as well." Before Njosgard could even complete his threat, Jin raised his right fist and easily punched a hole as wide as he was tall in the wall. "My patience is wearing thin with you, noble," Jin growled out, his glaring eyes silencing the Tenryubito. "Normally I would settle this diplomatically, but you forced my hand." Reaching his giant hand into his karakusa, he pulled out a den mushi, not a regular one, but a small black one. Seeing Saint Njosgard's already pasty white skin turn even whiter, the warlord gave him a victorious grin. "I assume you're familiar with the black den mushi. From the very second you were admitted, I have been sending every threat and confessions you made at me." Still pale as a ghost, the noble gave a nervous smile and laughed at him. "That's your ace in the hole. You stupid fool, who could possibly be listening? We control a vast majority of the civilized world, the Marines obey our every command, and no insignificant pirate will even do something to us, no matter how high his bounty is. Who do you think can even make us think twice?" "The Gorosei," Jin responded, causing the noble to shut his mouth in horror and to pale an unbelievable shade of white. "And I must say none of them are remotely happy with your actions toward my people." Suddenly a black snail popped out of its portable device, opening his mouth, an old voice that contained much wisdom. "What Jin says is true, Saint Njosgard. We are most displeased with what transpired down there." Feeling extremely ill, Njosgard sputtered in denial and shock. "No. What you have been hearing are lies. I knew he was carrying it." "Quit lying." An older raspy voice shouted at him, only this one sounded like a man who experienced many wars. "We are not as dumb as you may have thought yourself to believe. Don't you know what you've done? Not only have you caused a near fallout between humans and fishmen by attempting to shoot their queen, you have also threatened one of our Shichibukai. He's inferior." The saint screamed in response, tears started welling in his eyes and snot falling from his nose, showing that he was growing desperate. "That stupid fish has no right. No right. He's nothing but a lowly pirate that sold himself to you. He knows this all too well." A younger sounding voice responded. "But regardless, he formed a pact with us, and we need someone like him within our ranks, so our decision overrules yours." Gulping loudly, the noble made one desperate attempt to defend himself. "You can't be serious. We are human beings, the mightiest species in the entire world. We can beat them, no. We can exterminate them. Wipe them from the face of the earth with the power of our military." "That won't happen." A voice as old as the first one, but filled with a slight tiredness, responded. "We will not have a pointless war with Fishman Island. Even with all our military might, there will be pointless casualties on both sides. And all that bloodshed for what? Because a young fishman bit off your fingers for defending the queen? I think not, Saint Njosgard." But. No more buts." The final voice, filled with anger and arrogance, barked out at him. "When you have recovered, we are demanding you return to Mariagewa so we can discuss your punishment." Poo 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 punishment. But why? You're like us. We're relatives. All of us. Why? You're also nobles too, so why? Because we are enlightened. We let you and our other relatives live on a whim, or perhaps it's sentimentality. Now comply with the queen, or else. After the transmission ended, Jin gave the world noble a superior look and left the room, just missing the man fainting from shock. Many untold hours later, Otohime gently ran her fingers through Naruto's spiky blonde hair. While the tiger shark fishman was blissfully asleep, the queen took that time to digest everything he told her. It honestly shocked her to learn that a boy, barely a year older than her daughter, went through so much hardship in his life. The goldfish mermaid learned that after spending 4 blissful years with his parents, who were suddenly taken right out of his life, was almost immediately purged into a life of crime. She heard the rumors of the Fishman district, her husband's worst failure in his career as king of Ryuju Kingdom, but she didn't want to believe any of it. Whether it was denial for the love of her husband to overlook his mistakes, or denial that such a place existed. But she had the living proof sleeping in her lap. A boy who should have been in school or at least learning from his parents was instead beating other kids, and sometimes adults, for his territory, being a drug mule. And even to her, increasing horror, pit fights where the children beat each other half to death while the adults bet on who would win. Never again will you have to endure that, Naruto-kun. She whispered to him, I promise that after we get the reverie I will dedicate my time to fix the Fishman district. That's a promise, so that no one can ever go through any of that ever again. After putting the young tiger shark fishman to bed and tucking him in, Otohime gently kissed his forehead with a smile and left him to sleep. After shutting the door, she was surprised to see Jin almost in front of her. Sorry to disturb you, my queen. The former captain of the Sun Pirates apologized. But I had a feeling you would be with the young one after the incident with the royal armor. He held in a small chuckle when he remembered seeing several dozen knights in that horrendous armor chasing after a certain blonde. You would be right, Jin, Otohime responded. So how have the negotiations with the world noble been? Did you finally convince him to finally forgive Naruto? I did. The Knight of the Sea boldly lied to her. Placing her right hand on her chest, the queen sighed in relief. That's good. Thank you, Jin. Is it alright for me to see him? I'm sorry, but I just put him to bed. He had a mentally exhausting day. Seeing the whale shark fishman raise an eyebrow, Otohime explained what she meant. Naruto told me exactly what goes on in the Fishman district. I see. Jin winced a bit. Compared to many others like Arlong or Macro, he was one of the lucky ones. Because of his size, he wasn't a target for muggings or the usual beatdowns. He joined Neptune's military as soon as he reached the appropriate age. And basically got out of the life before it could even pull him in. I'll speak with him another time then, farewell my queen. Bowing as low as he could, the gigantic fishman walked away. A week later we find Naruto and Shirahoshi in the garden where they first officially met. But he wasn't exactly a happy camper, with the gigantic mermaid constantly decorating his head with flowers. Is this really necessary, Shira-chan? Naruto asked while his right eyebrow twitched in annoyance. Everyone was watching them, the guard sniggering as the young princess continued to place another crown of flowers on his head, making him look like he had a multicolored afro. Of course it is, Naru-chan, it makes you look so pretty. Shirahoshi giggled in response. I must agree, it does make you look rather pretty, Naruto-chan. His right eye twitching in severe annoyance, Naruto turned his head to see Fukabashi coming towards them, a playful smile on his face and a golden trident clutched in his right hand. Very funny, Prince Fukabashi, very funny. The blonde tiger shark fishman gritted out and turned his eyes away in annoyance. What's with the trident? You going to try out for the guard or something? Not after what you did to them. Fukabashi replied to him. But now that I'm older, father said that it would be a good idea for me to start practicing with my weapon of choice. Stamping the butt of the weapon on the ground, he gave a massive grin. So like my father, I chose the trident. You better hurry, Naruto, or you'll never surpass me. Oh yay. Naruto jumped to his feet and gave an intimidating stare that horribly failed due to his flower afro. I haven't been sitting on my butt during my entire stay here. Every day I work on my cardio and the muscles in my arms. I'll catch up to you soon. Shaking his head in an amused manner, the first prince knew that the blonde wasn't boasting like his younger brothers. Underneath his whiteikuta was a body that was quite sturdy, not remotely muscular because of his young age, but not fat either. Maybe one day, Naruto, but right now I need you take your wig off and have the two of you follow me. Sticking his tongue out at the elder merman, the blonde took the monstrous flower ornament off his head and followed the first son of the king, with the giant child mermaid trailing beside him. After exiting the garden, the two children following the teenager entered a hallway adorned with literally hundreds of paintings, couldn't help but stare at the various large-scale portraits of members of the royal family, various knights from the past, and a few humans. The four most striking portraits were one of King Neptune when he was in his prime, granted he was still a giant and had a shorter beard, but he was quite fetching in his armor. The second was a tall pale blue-skinned blue shark fisherman with small, round wide eyes, gill-like facial markings under his eyes and on his shoulders, and sharp triangular teeth. His hair that was a dull blue color was in the form of a shark fin. While he was wearing the Royal Knight's armor, his weapon of choice was something rather unusual. It looked like a sword, a very big sword, almost as tall as the wielder actually. From what Naruto saw, at the tip of the giant sword's handle was a small skull, but oddly enough the entire blade was wrapped in thick bandages. The third had two human men in it. The first was a tall man who wore a long red captain's coat and a red captain's hat with a Jolly Roger, depicting a smiling skull with a thick curvy mustache on its upper lip and two bones behind it. Beneath his coat, he wore a blue shirt and had a green sash around his waist. He had a white cravat around his neck, wore dark blue pants, and what appeared to be black sea boots. The man's most prominent physical features were thick black chin-length black hair, a curved black mustache, a fierce grin, and intense black eyes which showed an unyielding spirit. The second was a broad-chested muscular man with short strawberry blonde hair, round glasses and black facial hair, which were arranged in four stripe-like patterns across his lower jaw, and a scar over his right eye. He was wearing a t-shirt with an ornately decorated collar, white pants and a simple pair of black sandals. Finally, the last painting held another human, an abnormally large human. In fact, it looked like he even towered over Jin, but unlike the Knight of the Sea, he was well proportioned. The man had a long face, plowed because of the advanced age with many wrinkles around his yellow eyes, a white crescent-shaped mustache and was very muscular and had many scars running along his chest. The man wore a black bandana around his head and adorned himself with a white captain's coat which hung loosely from his broad shoulders and wore light, loose pants tucked inside his large black boots and a dark blue sash around his waist. Finally, clutched in his large right hand was a massive bento. "Brother Fukabashi, where are you taking us? And what's up with all these paintings?" Shirahashi asked as she looked in awe at the marvelous paintings. Looking over to his gigantic sister, the first son of Neptune grinned. "I'm taking you both to the gallery, dear sister. It's where many works of art are created here by none other than the Montissard family for generations." "But why are we heading there?" Naruto questioned. "You'll find out soon." Bringing his lower lip out in a mock pout, Naruto crossed his arms and continued to follow the shark merman. Soon enough the three entered a large, lavished room with red silk curtains, royal furniture, and to Naruto and Shirahashi's surprise and horror was a extremely tan two-spot octopus merman, almost the size of King Neptune. It wasn't his species, but what he was wearing. He was, for the better term, feminine, with a womanly face and long curly blonde hair tied off into a ponytail. He could easily be passed off as a woman except for his flamboyant clothes, which consisted of a baby blue beret, an orange ascot tied around his neck, a neon pink shirt with white roses adorning the silk fabric that was buttoned down to reveal his chest, a royal purple sash, and cherry red sunglasses that covered his eyes. Noticing the three entering the room, the odd merman smiled and bowed towards the three. "Prince Fukabashi, Zed is good to see you arrived on time." The others were getting antsy. He greeted them with an odd accent. "Thank you, Montague, we honestly can't thank you enough for doing this on such short notice." Fukabashi replied to the octopus merman. "Think nothing of it, my prince, for Zen generations my family has painted for Z royal family. Zed is always a pleasure, especially when Zed's a family portrait." "Paint?" Naruto asked. "I'm sorry, Mr. Painter, but if this is a family portrait, why am I here?" "I think that is obvious." Otohime's voice replied as the doors in the room opened, revealing the rest of the royal family. "What's obvious?" the blonde asked in confusion. Giggling in response, the queen practically floated over to him and kneeled down to his eye level. "Naruto, we all have been talking and we all decided to be your new parents." The blonde's heart stopped and his mouth was agape. "My what?" "Ho ho ho ho." Neptune let out his unique laugh. "Naruto, my boy, what my wife is trying to say is we would like you to be part of our family. Would you like that?" His blue eyes widening in complete surprise, Naruto turned his head towards Fukahashi, the eldest of the three brothers who were always kind and respected him. He smiled and nodded his head. He then looked over to Manbashi and Ryabashi, the two brothers who tussled with him at times, but always made him laugh when he was feeling down. They gave him their usual goofy grins and a giant thumbs up. Then looking up at Shirahashi, the young mermaid who already treated him no differently than the others, eagerly nodding her head up and down waiting for his answer. And finally the king and queen, the two who brought him into their home and treated him like he was one of their own, were giving him inviting smiles. Naruto began with a flustered look. "I thought I was already part of the family." Letting out a loud laugh, Neptune brought his giant arms out to the sides. "Then come over here and let it be official, my boy." Immediately a loud clapping noise echoed throughout the room. Darting their eyes, they saw Montague with massive anime-style tears falling from his glasses-covered eyes. "Votiful. Simply votiful. Everyone gather together, I must say this." pulling a gigantic easel, white canvas, and painting supplies from behind his back, which Neptune instantly concluded was some sort of devil fruit power. He brought his right hand out with his paintbrush clenched in his fist and his thumb pointed up. Deciding that a celebration would be held later, the family gathered together for their first family portrait. Once in position, Montague began painting with his gigantic brush. Not only was he using his right hand, but he was also using 6 of his 8 octopus legs. The image in front of his cherry red sunglasses coming to life, the texture, the shadowing, the pure raw emotion on the family's faces. Hours passed in what seemed like minutes. The flamboyant artist was perspiring, his blonde hair matted, and his glasses slipped to the bridge of his nose, exposing his bright green eyes, but his smile never faded once. Finally letting out a sigh, the octopus merman took a final look at the painting and placed his painting materials behind his back. "It is done," he happily announced. Turning the easel around to face the family, he took in great delight at seeing their satisfied smiles at his latest masterpiece. At the top of was the humongous king, Neptune, smiling with his eyes curved and arms crossed. At his left and right were Ryabashi and Manbashi, flexing their muscles, which looked rather comically. In the center was Shirahashi and Fukabashi in front of the giant mermaid and crossing his arms like his father and smiling. Shirahashi had her chin on the shark merman, her smiling beaming like a sun. And below Shirahashi and Fukabashi was Otohime with her hands cupped and in front in an elegant pose. Her smile was the brightest of all as she stared out. And next to her and below all of them was Naruto, who was weeping tears of joy. Even though it looked as if he was wailing, he was immensely happy due to his open vibrant blue eyes. For he now had a new family. One more week passed by, and come Monday all the inhabitants of Fishman Island were crowding around the entrance to the island. The day every man and women were glaring at the world noble beginning to board the ship to the surface. After a month of recovering from his wounds, Saint Njosgard was finally wearing his recently repaired suit with a Urukiman resin bubble around his head, so he didn't have to breathe the same air as lowly commoners, especially with what he viewed as an inferior race. But it didn't help that his forehead was wrapped in gauze, he was missing a tooth, or that his right hand was completely encased in plaster, preventing anyone from seeing his missing fingers. "I won't forget this, you stinking fish." Saint Njosgard snarled at the collective crowd. The nerve of it all, the livestock turning on their masters. "What right does he have to resent us after we saved his life?" One knight of the royal guard muttered angrily. "We shouldn't send that bastard back, it will only bring danger to the island." "I know what you mean," the knight next to him started to reply, but was interrupted by Otohime bumping into him. "Wait, please," she called out to the world noble. "It seems that we have much to discuss. I will accompany you to the surface." "Wait right there, Otohime," Neptune bellowed, following after her. "I cannot allow such a reckless act. If you are truly intent on negotiating with these nobles, then I'll go myself." The king continued on in a desperate attempt to stop his wife from doing something that could easily endanger her because of her impulsive behavior. Aladdin immediately turned to this king in surprise. "Your Majesty. Certainly, I can't imagine you of all people would get captured by humans, but still. No. It would be meaningless for you to go, dear," the queen replied in a serious tone. "It must not be a powerful warrior like you, but a physically frail individual such as myself who goes to the surface and returns safely. That is the only way to prove that it is safe for our people in the world above. That way, we can show the world that our people are not warmongers, but fellow sympathetic beings like surface dwellers as well." Of course, she was met with a lot of protests from the citizens, the children, and especially her husband. But Naruto, who was perched on Jin's shoulders, was quiet, unnaturally quiet. Jin could feel the complex emotions rolling off the tiger shark fishman between the intense mistrust and hatred he had for the world noble and the faint hope that his new mother would succeed. He heard the queen give everyone her parting words and Njosgard opening his mouth to no doubt object. But the warlord gave the man an intense glare that made him reel back before scoffing about their impudence. "All according to plan, you will get your wish soon, my queen," the whale shark fishman thought to himself as he watched his queen depart with the noble. 6 days. For 6 days the entire kingdom was tense with worry and anxiety. Many didn't find a wink of sleep, most businesses were closed for the time being, but most importantly our hero was racked with a bad feeling in his stomach. For 6 days he was restless, his body constantly in motion. For a good majority of the week he was always helping his new brothers keep Shirahashi in good spirits. But after having her constantly braiding flowers into his hair, squishing him with monstrous hugs and on one occasion putting him in a pink frilly dress, Naruto knew that he couldn't continue on. He needed answers, and out of every inhabitant in the kingdom there was one person that could provide him the answers he desired. And that was why he was sitting within the fancy building known as the Mermaid Cafe. Normally the smell of the various sweets and other delicious foods the cafe was known for would make his mouth moist and his stomach growl for them. But this visit was for business and not pleasure. So after being guided by one of the mermaids floating on one of the various bubbles to get around, he was seated in a nice plush chair. After thanking the mermaid, the tiger shark fishman squared his eyes onto the person in front of him. In front of him was a mermaid sitting on a gigantic crimson couch. Not a regular mermaid, mind you, but one of the most important mermaids in the kingdom besides the queen and the princess for her fortune-telling abilities. She was large, not as large as Shirahashi, but easily towering over most of the mermaids in the Mermaid Cove. She wore a purple blouse with a hood that covered most of her short black hair that was only buttoned in the middle, revealing her flat stomach and ample chest, with a string of beads around her waist that stopped in the middle of her short fin shark tail. She had a kind smile that showed off her sharp teeth and blue eyes that resembled shark eyes. "Ah. It's good to see you again, Naruto-kun." The Mako shark mermaid greeted him with a red lipstick smile. "After being adopted by the royal family, I feared that I may never see you again." The tiger shark shrugged. "That's absurd, Madam Shirley. I owe you too much of a great debt to just forget about your kindness." Naruto bowed his head towards her. "I wish I came under better circumstances," but feeling a giant but soft hand on his shoulder, he peered up to see the owner of the cafe, smiling at him with her sharp teeth. "I know you're worried about the queen, we all are, Naruto-kun," Shirley said to him. "Queen Otohime will come back to us safe and sound tomorrow, I promise you that." Was that a prediction? You already know the answer, young one, now head on home. I'm sure little Shirahashi's waiting for her newest Oni-chan. Shirley ruffled Naruto's hair for a brief moment and playfully shooed him from her room. After the tiger shark fishman left the cafe, the Mako shark mermaid brought her manicured hands to her head in sudden pain. She harshly gritted her teeth in order to not cry out in horror when she saw in front of her own eyes a shadowy figure with intense crimson eyes, standing with 12 other figures with flames in the background. What in the world? No. He would never do that, there's no way. She gasped out in denial. One more day passed and like every prediction Madame Shirley made in her entire life came true once again. In a grand manner, Otohime arrived on the ship she left on, and through the tearful cries of her people, the queen revealed to them a piece of paper signed by the Tenryubito and the Gorosei themselves. But on that day, a tall, slim-built Japanese bullhead fishman with a prominent hunch that put his head on equal level with his shoulders, cat-like whiskers, wearing a yellow fedora with a purple band covering his black hair that was rounded into dreadlocks. He was wearing a broadly red and white horizontal striped shirt under specialized green overalls for his 4 lanky legs. "The tobacco?" he asked in glee as he revealed his sharp teeth. "That's right, Captain Vander Decken," an unremarkable fishman replied. "A month's worth of waiting finally paid off. The guard that we paid off has confirmed that it's hidden somewhere in the palace. And it can cause anyone to age. That's what our intel says." Another unremarkable fishman boasted. "Could it?" say, Vander Decken gave them a creepy face and brought his right arm to waist level. "Turn a teensy little brat into a fully grown, sexy lady." "I don't doubt it for a second." The first one nodded at the captain of the flying pirates. Letting out a laugh of glee, the extremely odd-looking fishman began to prance around in some sort of victory dance. "That's it, folks," he proclaimed. "Our little problem is solved. With that box, I can marry Princess Shirahashi right away, I know it." Pointing at a random crew member, he barked out the order. "Steal me that tobacco right away." "Captain, the palace is impenetrable. But if you were to marry Shirahashi first, you would be able to get into the palace no problem, right?" Feigning a shocked look, Vander Decken reeled back before laughing a unique laugh. "Ho. Man, you guys are smart. I'm lucky to have guys like you." Placing his freakishly right-webbed hand on his chin, smiled about his future. "Yes, give that little cutie patootie 10 or 20 more years, she'd grow into a proper beauty. She'll grow even more gigantic, though." One of the crew members deadpanned. "So what? She's big-boned all right. I ain't got nothing against large ladies. Besides, the old saying the bigger the better is singing quite true for this situation." The captain spat back at him. "And once I'm Shirahashi's husband, it will finally be mine. The power and wealth of the royal family my clan has sought after for generations." Pulling a pen and some paper, he then proclaimed, "All right. Let's start with the wedding invitations. On the double, men." "Aren't you supposed to propose first, Captain Decken?" the crew screamed out in response before he could even start. Meanwhile, in the Gyeonkered Plaza, Queen Otohime was once again preaching to her people for what was hopefully the final time. Standing on the stage that she usually preached at, she held up the paper high above her head, signed by the world nobles and the Gorosei. The word of the world nobles and the Gorosei hold great sway even at the reverie of the Council of Kings. She began her speech with noticeable relief in her voice. "And this is an official letter from them. This is what it says. For the sake of improving relations between humans and fishmen, we support the proposal of the attached petition. In other words, if we gather enough signatures to submit at the next reverie, then this piece of paper will grant our proposal to put strength to be realistically put into action. Our relocation to the surface is no mere dream. Her words that were always worth their weight in gold stunned the residents of Fishman Island speechless. The Tenuibido, possibly the most evil human beings in existence with the help of the Gorosei, though many never heard of them, granted their support to their queen's long-awaited proposal. In all honesty, none of them knew what to think. Clearing her throat, Otohime finished off her speech that would wither make or break all her efforts at the coexistence with mankind. All that we need now is to gather more signatures. I can only wait for all of you to make your decisions. And I beg of you to reach out for a life of harmony, for a life on the surface where we can achieve true peace. For several long seconds no one dared to move, time just seemed to stall, waiting for the proper response to a 7-year-long struggle. Otohime's smile began to fade slowly. Then it was finally broken when several children rushed to the stage and deposited their slips of paper into the crate that Otohime always had with her when she made her speeches. And almost immediately the gathered merfolk at a rally began handing in their own forms. The goldfish mermaid was shocked. Touched by what the kindness of a few children can bring. Overjoyed that her ideal may one day soon be achieved. Soon the small crate began overflowing with papers. And to Otohime's joy, the Minister of the Right, a seahorse merman, her bodyguard and loyal supporter to her cause, came floating to her rescue with a gigantic wicker basket in his sturdy hands. Seeing Otohime literally shedding tears of joy, he gave her a thoughtful smile. "Your Majesty, I see you are overcome by emotion. Please, take a seat and rest." Raising his arms in immense joy, the merman bellowed to the people. "Come, everyone. This is the place to show your support to our queen's passionate endeavor." So overcome with emotion, Otohime had to be escorted by the Minister of the Left and another guard to the castle, crying tears of joy all the way. And when she arrived at the palace, she was bombarded by her family, Neptune with tears in his eyes, and their biological children gave her the greatest and most loving hug that she ever received in her entire life. Even Naruto, who out of all of them had the best reason to oppose everything she worked for, couldn't help but feel immense happiness for her accomplishment. Little did they know that their happiness would be shattered by the glaring eyes spying on the happy family. For days, the plaza was filled from across the land, eager to submit their signatures for Otohime's cause. But for the goldfish mermaid, she was about to have a serious discussion with the oldest male siblings in her family. It was that moment, she began, that I found the courage and assurance in myself that this country can truly change. That moment? Fukabashi asked. Yes, that day, when the Sea Kings peered into the island. Otohime clarified for them. Ah, yes. That certainly was a surprise. Manbashi chirped up. It was Shirahashi who called them, you know. Eh? Seeing their shocked faces, the queen let out a soft giggle before reaching her right hand out to caress a passing fish. We merfolk have the ability to understand the hearts of the ocean's fish and to communicate with them, yes. But no mermaid has been able to communicate with those gigantic sea kings. That is beyond even your father, Neptune, the only person on this island able to communicate with whales. However, according to the records of the royal family, once in every few centuries, a mermaid is born with the ability to understand and communicate, even with the mighty sea kings. A mermaid who is able to speak with sea kings. Fukabashi crossed his arms over his barrel chest and reflected on what his mother was saying to them, while his other two brothers shouted in awe. "And you're saying that, Shirahashi, mother?" asked a shocked Manbashi. "Wow. Amazing. I'd love to be able to on a sea king's back one day," followed Raibashi. The same can be said for Naruto. Otohime continued to say, just like Shirahashi, every few hundred years a fishman is born with a great power within him. But unlike your sister who can communicate with sea kings, Naruto has the raw power of a sea king. Raw power of a sea king. Manbashi's eyes nearly popped out of his head when he heard that. That is correct. Not only does he have their strength, anger and ferocity, but also a powerful alpha aura that would make even the most ferocious creatures submit to him. According to legend, that is, these two will meet a person to direct them onto the right path, and once the time came they would combine their powers to change the world. Our little Naruto and Shirahashi changing the world. Raibashi squeaked out in surprise. Then maybe it'll help what you're trying to do, mother. I feel certain of it. Otohime smiled at them. The power of love can save the lives of thousands if the will is strong enough. However, as used wrongly, the power that those two hold is great enough to sink the world beneath the tides. They aren't aware of their abilities, and if anything were to happen to send the two of them into a panic or anger, like what you three saw that day, it is possible that in their current states, that they would both go on a mighty rampage. If they did that, then Fishman Island would be completely destroyed. What should we do, mother? Raibashi asked. For the moment, I will do everything in my power to ensure that never happens. But I ask that you, my sons, grow to become fine warriors. And use that strength to protect them with your lives. Of course, mother. We will not fail you. The three mermen bellowed out their promise. But then on that exact same day, it happened. Suddenly, and without warning. The tens of thousands signatures caught fire. The entire plaza was in chaos, soldiers were frantically trying to save every piece of paper they could. Otohime, who brought her children to witness the fruits of her labor, was calling out for water. The loud bangs soon echoed throughout the area, several of the guards all too familiar with the sound of gunfire looked towards the source for the shooter and if anyone was hit. The minister of the right brought his eyes towards the queen, to his horror he saw her clutching her bleeding chest and collapsed to the ground. Queen Otohime has been shot. Where's the shooter? Who was it? Aladdin barked out. There's a sniper lurking in the vicinity. Protect the royal family at all costs. Jin barked out orders to several knights that were standing by him. Mother! Fukabashi yelled in shock. His brothers followed with similar shouts. Shirahashi was dead silent. Her eyes wide agape and her mouth frozen, her young pre-adolescent mind still trying to wrap what has just occurred. As the minister of the right cradled his queen in his arms and barking for a medic, Naruto was the first to reach her wounded body. His blue eyes already spilling tears down his face and his hands clutching her right hand that was stained with her freshly spilled blood. Even as his siblings crowded around her. Mother! Yelled the brothers save for Naruto, who still remained silent as his adoptive younger sister. Otohime's eyes were half shut as she drew deep breaths to help sustain her lungs. Queen Otohime! Yelled out the civilian bystanders. As Shirahashi remained rooted, catatonic, a figure walked up to her. Well, isn't this quite a ruckus? The figure, Vanderdecken, raised his right hand and placed it on Shirahashi's lower left arm. Quite a terrible predicament. Don't you agree, princess? A nearby guard spotted Decken and raised his pistol. Who are you? Stay away from the princess, come. He fired but missed as the four-legged fishman scampered away. Mother, are you alright? Wailed the oarfish merman. We'll get you to a hospital in no time. Hang in there, assured Mambashi. Fukabashi was different thoughts as he released a low threatening growl. Who could have done this? And his face contorted to one of anger and fury, his teeth bared. I'll make them pay. I'll make them pay. Beside the slowly dying queen, the adoptive son of the royal family was slowly breathing in and out. His teeth were clenched and bared, and although his hair covered his eyes, they were slowly being covered by a shade of red. Yet he did not clench his mother's hand tighter, despite some veins bulging within his arms. Yet Otohime raised her hands, one onto Fukabashi's trident, the other to cup Naruto's cheek. Stay by my side, my angels, and please wipe those horrid looks off your faces. Your Majesty, you need treatment. I let my guard down, I was just so happy to finally have all those signatures, I did not, she gave a wheeze. Fukabashi, Naruto, if there is anyone who should be bitter it should be me, not you. Yet despite her plea, Naruto could not listen to her, her voice becoming faded. He did not know it, but his slowly rising fury was clouding him. He did not listen to his two brothers' wails, but through his hair he saw his sister. The same sister who annoyed him on hour's end with creating flower crown, hugs, and giggles about to burst in agonizing tears. And mother, somehow the blonde tiger shark could hear her, even if his fury distorting his hearing, and as if on K, his hearing slowly began to return to him. Manbashi and Ryabashi turned towards her, then back to Naruto's slowly reddening eyes and bulging veins, and saw that she was about to begin to lament, and remembered. If anything were to happen to send the two of them into a panic or anger, like what you three saw that day, it is possible that in their current states, that they would both go on a mighty rampage. And Shirahashi and Naruto screamed. But the latter sounded more like a roar filled with sorrow. Shirahashi. Naruto. Wait. But suddenly their screams cut short, Shirahashi's tear-filled eyes slowly reopening, and Naruto's widening in shock. Two of his adopted brothers they were with tears clouding their vision and runny noses. Akamambo. Akamambo. Look Naruto. Everything will be alright. Akamambo. Hey Shirahashi, everything's as cool as night. Akkamambo, it'll be okay. Everything is alright when you mambo dance, oyeah. Shouted Manbashi at the top of his lungs, dancing and singing, even as he continued to shed his tears. What fun, such fun. Nothing can be wrong. Naruto, Shirahashi, let us sing this song. The four of us are always with you both, Latidu. Young princes. Shouted the minister of the left. What on earth you? Shirahashi stopped her tears, and Naruto brushed his hair back, revealing his blue and red eyes. Not reddened by the power of the Sea King within, but with tears. His mouth agape. His much bigger sister was clamped shut. Someone stop the princes. The trauma has made them gone mad. Yelled the minister of the right as knights and guards gathered around and tried to hold them down. Watch on, mother. Everything will be alright. People couldn't tell if Manbashi was shouting, more like wailing, even as his visage still contained that strained smile. Siblings stick together through and through. To protect it we do lot he do. Ryabashi was having as much as a hard time as his fellow brother, looking up in order to avoid looking at the slowly growing pool of blood at his mother's side. Shirahashi continued to sob, not on the level as before. She gazed in amazement at her brothers. "You two you are," muttered the blonde tiger shark as tears wept from his own eyes. "How can such people contain such great strength, even in a situation such as this?" Fukabashi had similar thoughts as he silently sobbed, yet his gaze held nothing but the highest of admiration towards his brothers. "Stop this at once. Can't you see the condition Her Majesty is in?" And Naruto gazed down and gasped. His adoptive mother, the queen of Ryuju Kingdom, was giving the most happiest smile he has ever seen her bear. Naruto saw Otohime's green eyes staring into his blue ones, a smile on her face, even though she was so racked with pain. Gently squeezing his hand within hers as if to tell him not to worry, he saw the life leave her eyes. "No, no, not again. Please God, not her. Anyone but her," he whispered out in denial. Otohime reopened her eyes and placed 2 fingers and lips and gave a kiss, then placed those fingers onto Naruto's own as he gasped. She gave another smile. Naruto could hear his older brother claiming how they will all grow up to become strong warriors, recollect the signatures, and protect Shirahashi with their lives. The tiger shark couldn't agree more. "We are so close," Otohime whispered. "I know that all of you can reach the light of the sun." All of the bystanders and pedestrians began to weep, as did the ministers. But not the royal family, who connected their fingers. "They killed her?" he heard a voice echo over the plaza. Looking upwards, Naruto saw none other than Hody Jones, holding by the neck in his powerful right hand was a human. "A human killed our queen." On the day of Queen Otohime's funeral, when everyone thought that things couldn't get any worse, it unfortunately did. A letter was sent to Shirahashi, not by mail, or even a delivery fish, no, it flew straight through the castle walls. When the princess showed it to Neptune, it was discovered to be a love letter of all things. Seeing that it was from Vanderdecken, Neptune forbade the children from attending his wife's funeral for the fear of another assassination attempt. That was why they were standing in front of a camera dressed in black funeral tuxedos. Prince Fukabashi being the most charismatic of the siblings, giving his speech about inheriting his mother's will. "Before she died, my mother said that the real sun is within sight. Maybe our hearts won't make it in time for the reverie due in 2 years. But there's another one in 6 and another in 10 years. We decided that we will inherit our mother's will, even if it takes up our whole lifetime." Pausing for a bit, the first son let his words sink into the mourners watching the broadcast. "Some of you probably changed their minds because of this incident. We will destroy the remaining signatures. We will start again, from scratch. And one day when everybody's hearts are healed, let's dream of the sun once again." It would be later in the day when Jin met with Naruto. As the Shichibukai peered down at the tiger shark fishman who held the power of the Sea King, he saw the boy's eyes. No longer were they the bright and shining blue orbs that he remembered, they were the eyes of a broken man who lost everything. And Jin couldn't help but feel for him. Not only did he lose his real parents at a young age, but after enduring the harsh reality of the Fishman district. Being adopted by the royal family and then losing the person who treated him no differently than her own children, honestly Jin didn't want to see anyone who looked good after what he experienced. "Boss Jin, I have a favor to ask you," Naruto whispered out. Looking straight at the whale shark fishman, he clenched his fists. "I ask no, I beg you to take me as your pupil." Not at all surprised at the request, the former captain of the Sun Pirates kept his stoic features and looked down at the boy. "Are you sure, Naruto-kun? If I were to take you as a pupil, you will be thrust headlong into the ugly truth of the world. Whatever innocence you have now will be taken from you. Destroyed. I will take you, but I will demand 100% commitment from you if you are to master the ways of fishman karate, but the question is, are you ready for this?" The tiger shark hid his eyes behind his hair as he held his head down. "My innocence was destroyed years ago, and I don't care what happens to me now," Naruto replied. "A madman has targeted my sister. I can't protect her. I can't protect anyone as I am now. I'm ready for anything you throw at me. So please." He raised it back up, determined eyes blazing. Jin nodded. "Then so be it. That's it for today. I hope did you enjoyed. If you do, please hit that like button, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Bye.